Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, and welcome to another episode of Fanalysis, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I'm Retty4, this is Greyjoy91.
Hello.
And this is Jenserai1.
Justin Loyal, unafraid of toil.
Summarise this chapter for us, Matt.
So chapter 10, the Rogue Bludger. But this is basically moving like the story from, point B to point C, or, however you want to think of it. This is really kind of just like a chapter where a bunch of stuff happens, but mainly there's a Rogue Bludger involved. So I don't really have like a firm summary in mind, because it's basically the trio trying to sleuth out the mystery, and at some point Harry gets hurt playing Quidditch. So let's go.
We open with Lockhart inducing a horrific amount of cringe on Harry's poor life. I would not accept going up to the front of a class and enacting or reenacting, I suppose, in Lockhart's mind, the scenes from all of his different books. This is horrible to read even.
I know. Of course, it does reflect Lockhart to a certain extent, learning from his mistakes. He's like, okay, no more live creatures in class. That did not turn out well. Let's not do that again. Let's just turn this whole thing into a two-man show all about me, because what I care about is me.
Yeah, it's hard to get through. I just feel bad for Harry on every level. But he goes through it because they're trying to keep him in a good mood so that they can get the one teacher that would be stupid enough to do this, to get the permission slip for him for the book, and which she gets with relative ease.
Of course, the funny thing is that I found that her excuse to get the book actually made a little bit of sense, because she basically said, okay, I read your book Gadding with Ghouls, and I saw your thing about slow-acting venoms, so I want to read a potions book to get some more information on that. Like, that excuse actually made a little bit of sense, if you accept the caveat. Yeah. And it's like, that's an excuse that could be bought. It's like, not an excuse that Snape would buy, but an excuse that could be bought by someone who's not Snape.
Or
McGonagall wouldn't either. That's the thing, is like you really do need somebody who's just not going to think too much about why you need it or
somebody
what else
really
you're capable of doing. Yeah,
as said in the last chapter. But yeah, they get the permission, and they go to the library and to kind of withdraw the book. Again, going into the whole notion of pinch is like, I don't buy this. Let me check, and just looking up into the light, looking for a forgery. I mean, why bother? It's Gilderoy, of course he let them. And yeah, they get the whole of the information they need. I like the description of the different ways you have to treat the ingredients in the very complex recipe. I like that this is for the first time we've really seen at least a minor dive into the potion side of the world. It's nice that they keep things a little bit more magical rather than scientific, despite being both.
There's really no sense in making, and I'm not saying this is what you're doing, there's no sense in trying to make sense, like logical sense of it, but it is nice having those details explaining like why things are more complex than others. Yeah, this
takes longer just because the ingredients need to be treated or prepared or even extracted this particular way. It's the difference between science and magic. Some things that you need a full moon when you pluck this because it doesn't really matter why. And yeah, the kind of scene establishes beyond everything else that is like the month that is the delay. It explains why it's not going to come up until later in the book, and they can't jump straight into just making this potion. So we buy ourselves a few chapters of in the meanwhile, which immediately is filled with the Quidditch match. The lead up to that, we get more of Wood fanaticism, which I again enjoy as ever. Just like you have to get whatever you do, even if it kills you, grab the snitch. Because they're being so thoroughly outpaced by the Nimbus 2001s, they know that's going to be how they have to win the game. Despite their best efforts, because they do give it a good try.
Of course, the funny thing is like you just mentioned that they're being outpaced by the Nimbus 2001s, and that just kind of got me thinking about. But what about the other side of the coin? Like maybe the idea that since the entire Slytherin team now all have Nimbus 2001s. Maybe the idea of the brooms being so fast that they don't maneuver quite so well. And the idea that maybe they don't know how to handle the broom because it's so overpowered.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways you can get around it. And obviously the Gryffindor team are getting close to score because he mentions that Angelina gets blocked by one of the bludgers that weren't being paid attention to by the beaters because they're dealing with what's actually happening in the chapter to start with, for the most part, the rogue bludger. I like the description of and the vehemence of Ron and George and Fred and George, about defending Harry on that one as well. Like they just immediately go for defending it, and just the way she writes the dialogue, like someone's tampered with this bludger. Like I like the way she gives that voice across in the description of what's happening. It's a good example of that. Obviously, it's always good. She's genius for that kind of thing. But this is one of the kind of standout performances that even in the audiobook, I remember always noting. And and so they when we actually get back down onto the ground after Harry's done the kind of whole fly around with them defending him thing, and during the timeout, we get like the end, the kind of Gryffindor camaraderie, the team backing him, and Wood kind of like, I want to win, but I also don't want my secret to die, and it's like it's balancing off, and George and Fred is the one who kind of stands up and says, what a stupid thing to do, tell him to get it or die trying. Come on, it's their kind of family priorities coming out again.
Mrs. Weasley.
Yeah, they just have. She keeps. This is not a scene where they need to be prevalent, and she puts a lot of time and effort into developing them in the background here. I mean, it's these kind of moments that keep the side characters of the story so present in our minds and so influential to the overall narrative along the sidelines.
They're reckless, when it's them, but not when it's somebody that they care about.
Oh yeah, and that's consistent.
That's the Mrs. Weasley aspect of them. Yeah,
yeah, and like we said with the previous, but with the Christmas thing, they just want to get families together. They're just so inherently likable and just good people, despite their their rambunctiousness, shall we say?
Mm-hmm.
Even at the end of this, when we get the snitch caught and it's resolved and the Quidditch match is over, because we don't really need to go into description of that. Harry just plays well, as you'd expect. They're the ones in the background wrestling the thing to the ground and trying to get it back in the box. Just the visual of that, the physical representation of them, taking things into hand. I love the twins in this chapter. They're really a strong presence here for me.
Yeah.
Even as Harry's staring up and looking in the eyes of the grinning eye of the face of doom for his moment here.
The other thing I find interesting about this particular Quidditch game is that it's another example of the films changing the weather for the game, because in the book here, it's described as heavy rain with lots of mud on the ground, whereas in the movie, it's a bright sunlit day start to finish.
Well, it's supposed to be this fun action-adventure scene in the film, isn't it? It's not anywhere near as fast in terms of, I guess the difference between screen time and page time. So they want to kind of make it a big, joyful event in the middle of a otherwise relatively sinister film because of what's happening. Whereas in the book they have more time to spend on fleshing that out in more of the in-between scenes, so they don't have to worry about it as much.
The enmity between Harry and Malfoy, directly that rivalry, that's like a big aspect of that movie. And to a degree it is here in the books as well, but I mean they spend more time, not necessarily more time allocated to it, but it's a bigger focus because other ancillary things that are in the books like Death Day Party and so on, those aren't there. So like they want to make that a stronger aspect of the story in the film for understandable reasons, I would think.
Yeah. Whereas here it's just a case of him it's the snitch is hovering there for like a few seconds and it's just okay, and the focus is very clearly even in the prose, not Malfoy. Even when he's brought up, it's always to the side or in the background or you should have seen Flint, that kind of thing. But whereas in the film he's front and center.
In the film, they kind of made this a very direct confrontation between Harry and Malfoy, down to the fact where the whole thing where they're just racing after that snitch through the trench around the field.
Which was a good scene, don't get me wrong. I enjoyed that in the film, especially as a child. But it's less I don't know. It's less contrived in the book. You don't need to force those action beats out between the two rivals when they're not really rivals in the book. Not in that sense anyway. The physical.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they are, but the rivalry isn't the point of the story in the books. Like in the film, they kind of hone in on that. I think that the word you use is apt. Like it's not as needed here, whereas on screen it was more necessary.
Yeah, particularly again, like you said, for the time that they were using, they didn't have the Death Day Party to kind of replace that part of the approach.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Gilderoy Lockhart decides to turn up, and naturally. Well, instead of just letting someone else do this properly, I'll just pretend I can do it, and it doesn't matter how wrong it goes.
I wonder how many chapters he's not in. He's like he's the fourth star of this book. He's all over the place.
Lockhart's prevalence in the book is just a perfect example of how this guy is just such a glory hound that he will pretty aggressively insert himself into situations where he's not needed. Like, this is just another example of Lockhart wanting to attach himself to Harry and do something, but he ends up just making the situation worse, i.e. your arm now has no bones.
And just the description of it as well, looking down at the flesh flavored like rubber glove, like, oh god, the feeling of having your arm with no bones in it. I mean, to say nothing of the scientific problems that would entail beyond the whole magical issue. It's like, oh god. She does a good job of not making it too gory and going too far with the description, but giving you just enough where your imagination fills in the blanks. Not pleasant. But he's returned back to the people who should have dealt with this immediately afterwards, not Lockhart, in the form of Madame Pomfrey and the hospital wing, as you would expect. He gets a lot of hospital wing visits after Quidditch. He's not the luckiest player in the world, Harry. I mean, he's the secret. It's established, yeah.
That's routinely made note of in the series. He gets hurt a lot. I mean, I forget when it happens, but at some point, Madame Pomfrey greets him like, "Oh, it's you again."
Yeah,
she's tired of seeing him.
Yeah, especially considering that he's not just the Quidditch games with him as well. You know, all the ridiculous events and stuff. It's like, oh God, Potter, are you kidding me? What would these kids do without me? I mean, that comes up at some point.
One little detail I enjoyed in the film with Harry's boneless arm is that even though he was wearing his Quidditch handguard glove, which kept his hand in a hand-like shape, I still like the little detail of when you notice that the fingers poking out the end of the glove are still slack and kind of bulbous, as if it's just an empty glove. It's like, because, you know, in the book, obviously no mention was made of protective gear, so it's like, but yeah.
They did a good, they did an alternative kind of visual for it in the film, because obviously you couldn't go that grim in the film, as far as the book did. They just kind of made it all rubber rather than just completely, like, empty.
Deflated.
Yeah, ooh, God. So, but both work. I like the way they did the effect, or the visual in the film. It's well done. But yeah, the team kind of come in and fill him in with the details that have happened behind the scenes when he's been otherwise occupied, and they get their party kind of disrupted by Madame Pomfrey, as you'd expect. And in the night, when he's going through this horrible regrowing of the arm, as promised by the nurse, we get the introduction of Dobby, he wakes up to have him sponging his head, which I'd forgotten about that little detail thanks to the difference in the films. It's like, oh yeah, what do you do? Wake up and just Dobby just staring you right in the face.
Yeah, and the film he's kind of hearing like the sound again, like you know, and it's sort of eerie, and then hello, like he wakes to see Dobby just there, like, which means Dobby was just like,
yep,
like you know, like just like, you know, staring at him the whole time. Oh God. Which he does do actually one Christmas, just waiting for Harry to wake up.
Yeah, he does. But yeah, the number of times Harry wakes up to these giant green orbs is too many. But we get I like the discussion that happens here. Actually, it's obviously it's over the top. It's Dobby. What do you expect? But not only do we get the fill-in of him actually being the person who blocked the platform entrance, and also obviously enchanted the bludger, but we also get the kind of backstory of why he cares so much about Harry. Not just him personally, but the world, his people. You know, the people like him at large, the downtrodden, the people that would have been extremely persecuted by Voldemort's reign. Back in the day.
That's why I like Dobby even this early on. I mean, you grow to love him anyway, or I think you should. If you don't, then I'm sorry, we can't be friends. But I mean, I really like Dobby even here because as he notes, it makes no difference to his life. You know, like there's nothing that's gonna prop him up as far as he can see. He's pretty hopeless on that. But because of what Harry represents, how important he is, he's important to the world. And Dobby has that just pure sense of empathy and foresight. I really like that foresight, it being as simple-minded as he is,
Yeah, and just the idea that he's feeling the empathy for those people around him. Like I said, having him not be
people he doesn't know. Yeah. He's stuck in Malfoy Manor. Like he just knows that he's good for the world. Yeah,
and it's brilliant. Yep. It makes the ultimate payoff for him. Well, not quite ultimate because obviously that's very tragic, but the middle ultimate payoff for him in this book alone, and when he resurfaces in the rest of the series, it makes it so much more satisfying. Because yes, he got what he deserved. He
gets 4 good years at least.
He gets that much. Before the ultimate tragedy.
Yeah. And the thing is that the ultimate tragedy is something that Dobby himself, by his own admission, wouldn't have traded for anything because, as far as he was concerned, it was worth it.
And it was, by and large. That's why it's the tragedy. Yeah. It's the payment, the price was not too high, but still, thank you, Dobby. It's a thank you moment rather than Dobby, why did this have to happen, kind of thing.
Yeah. And this is also the bit where Dobby kind of gives an explanation of what his own life is like in Malfoy Manor, and it just kind of makes a bit of a sad point about how. The impression I have is that the only reason why Dobby actually desires freedom, unlike other house elves, is because the Malfoys are so ridiculously horrible to him that he's come to the point where he just can't be mindlessly loyal. He's resenting them even as he's obeying them because they're just that abusive. But it's like, but the sad thing is how many other house elves don't have that resentment just because their wizard masters are just a wee bit more tactful and delicate in how they treat them.
A lot, probably. But I mean, especially anyone that lives at Hogwarts or works at Hogwarts. He's perfectly happy to be a house elf. He just, he wants
the
options.
choice. Yeah, he wants the choice to do it rather than be forced to. Completely understandably, as we know. But yeah, the conversation is interrupted. The sounds of people approaching cause him to disapparate. I love that it's he quietly disapparates effectively. It's like giant crack that no one else hears because he's not exactly subtle, Dobby, and that comes up quite a few times. But yeah, we get the petrified form of Colin Creevey brought in by Dumbledore and McGonagall and the like. And Harry obviously pretends to be asleep as he hears this. This is kind of when the tone takes that shift.
Oh.
What?
I was just thinking, like, this might be random, or I mean, it is random, but it might be false. But setting aside personal enmity, couldn't Sirius have just gone back to his house, grabbed a creature, and said, "Take me into Gryffindor, like common room, like because they can disapparate anywhere and they can transport you."
Very true. Yes, that is a possibility. He just didn't do it.
I think
killed Scabbers at any point. Damn it, Sirius.
It probably didn't occur to him to try that until after he was back at his family home and realized, oh, creature's still here. It's like because
That's a good point. He might have just he's dead. You're
still alive.
He turns up. Oh God, you're still here.
Well, the other problem is that because Sirius himself has so much of a negative attitude towards Creature, it was also like he didn't consider Creature an option simply because he didn't want to interact with Creature at all, because Creature is another reminder of what he ran away from.
Where were we though before we got that? Oh yeah, the petrified stage. Yeah, so Colin's been brought back. He was trying to get to Harry to deliver some grapes because friend in the hospital. Of course you do that. That's just the done thing.
In the middle of the night.
Yeah, well, I mean, you had to sneak in. Apparently, yeah, that's a bit weird. But
just
convenience.
Come the next morning.
It's not even that bit. It's not even that bit that gets me. The convenience. The thing that gets me is that it was supposedly avoided being worse only by the fact that Dumbledore turned up. Dumbledore just happened to be coming down for a hot chocolate and encountered Colin Creevey, and that was what is implied that made the basilisk run off. Is that what is this about?
Well, I mean, that's like the mildest of just happened to be for me. So I can forgive it. But yeah, it's plot convenience. Yeah, but yeah, he really just the whole thing could have been avoided if he just came the next morning when you're allowed to visit.
Mm-hmm. But he couldn't wait. And yeah, Dumbledore knows everything in this school. That's the hand wavy thing. Just not enough, and never when it actually matters.
I think it's charming that Dumbledore just he could easily, I'm sure, just summon hot chocolate, but he's gonna prowl around this to go get hot chocolate.
But yeah, I like the visual of him in his dressing gown just going down to the kitchen. It's like he could just ask them to bring one to him if nothing else.
Dumbledore's on patrol when he's doing stuff like that. I need a mundane task just so I can make my presence known around the school. Otherwise, who knows what might pop off without me? Case in point.
It's like, oh, but I suppose this is why I'm here today.
Yep.
But yeah, they deliver him to the hospital wing, and we get that kind of reaction from Harry, where it's like, oh, okay, this is the thing that's happened, and this is now confirmation that the chamber has been opened again. So the mystery is afoot once more. The trio are now going to be set on solving this one for the rest of the book.
Yeah, it's and we get confirmation that there is a Chamber of Secrets after the whole binge downplaying it. The teachers are aware of it, just not for reasons that become clear later on. They can't do much about it except wonder about what how. As it's who, right? Is what he says.
Yeah.
Or it's not. That's not the question.
No, yeah, it's not who. It's how. Yeah, is what he says, which is where it's one of those minor things because that kind of thinking doesn't really get explored. That's dropped there and then left. Harry doesn't address that with the trio later on or anything. He just it's left for the reader to wonder. And the reason we know, of course, is because Dumbledore is pretty sure what happened, but it never gets explained until way later on. And it's nice that you notice that we get you mentioned that we get confirmation because that. A lesser book would have left it at the description from Binns. Oh, and naturally, it just happens to be real. This is kind of further confirmation that this has happened before. That it's a real thing. It's not just letting it be drifting in the back of our minds as this nebulous. Or maybe it will be a thing. We get explanation that this makes it sound like it's a lot more of a physical entity in the setting because it has happened before. That didn't have to be a part of the story, and it works better that it did, or is rather. The thing, what I always wondered how big are the Hogwarts walls pipes? That's the thing that I always found
big.
odd.
I always felt like he worked backwards. Like he went down. He somehow got down there from underneath the lake through a different means and built the place in the first place, and then worked his way upward from there.
I wasn't even talking about that side, though that's definitely a factor as well. I meant the basilisk, like how it's supposed to be moving through the pipes in the walls.
I understand that. That's what I mean. It's like he would have built them to be, or because the people have to be not paying attention to it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how long would it have taken him to build the thing in the first fucking place? And then the opening is like, oh, like he just came out the other. Oh, it's in a toilet. Like, well, the entrance is here, I guess. You know, like not.
Salazar Slytherin doing that is brilliant. But then obviously the pipes in the walls as well. Like how big did the damn thing have to build?
Just magically expand them.
Like, okay, he's
just magically.
One day he's walking down the corridors of the Hogwarts while the rest of them are teaching. He's like, okay, insert massive magic pipe, massive magic pipe. Just going through all of the walls or making them all.
I'm surprised they even have pipes instead of just vanishing toilets.
Well, they don't have plumbers, as we've said before.
Well, I did read a Pottermore article explaining all of that, but I got better things to do than go look it up. So the other thing to consider is maybe just the idea that the basilisk is not quite as ridiculously huge as it is depicted on film. It's like in the book, when it's later described, its length is given, but not its thickness. Girth, it could very easily just be that, sure, it's still a ridiculously massive snake with a circumference like this, but it's mostly long and slender rather than big and bulky. It's like you don't have the massive head that you got in the movie.
It's the mobile phone snake that just gets longer and longer and longer and just crawls up the pipes that way. But yeah, either way, it was just something that I've mused about before. Like, how the hell is it getting around? Like, how big is the plumbing in this place? But yeah, that's the last bit of the chapter as well. There's nothing else to discuss really, unless I'm missing another thing, Matt, right? That's the close.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It's the close of the question. Closing the question of Dumbledore saying, who, not who, but how. And I like that McGonagall and Harry are equally perplexed. It's like, what are you talking about, Dumbledore? Why can't you ever just make sense? You clearly know something. Explain it. But that
and I gotta say, this is one moment where I can understand Harry himself not getting up and saying anything, but if I was in Harry's shoes, I would have immediately gotten out of bed, walked over to Dumbledore, and explained the whole episode with Dobby.
That would have killed the story, though, so I can't have that.
Yeah. That makes too much sense.
Yeah. But anyway, that wraps up our thoughts on the chapter. Anything we've missed or you want to discuss in greater detail than we have done, let us know in the comments down below. I am ready for, and I still don't have an outro.
I'm GreatJedi91. Thanks for watching.
Sir, ask no more. Ask no more of poor Dobby. Dark deeds are planned in this place.
Okay, real quick. The hilarious thing was his camera wasn't on for me, and I just heard the voice, and it was just too much for a second.
It just blurred for me, but yeah, goodbye.